Yes, baby. Yeah, and I got to the same point you were, where it was kind of like looks money game. Like I'm kind of getting tired of it, but then you don't want to end up going into MBTI and crystals and crap. So it's like that weird balance of keeping things fresh for yourself, but also not just going down some stupid rabbit hole.
Well, you also kind of have to figure out, I think, like with any product you do, what's the intended audience for this shit?
Ooh, there's a good question.
Because it's like there's a good market in catching guys when they come straight off when they're coming in from the anger phase and they're just joining the space and just slamming them with looks money game, looks money game, looks money game.
Oh, the
Because you got
wham
them
ain't
for a
shit.
yeah, but because you got them for a good 12 to 18 months if you do that shit.
Mm-hmm.
And with the churn being what it is, you're always going to have customers coming in that think your products are brand new and amazing. So you basically sell the same product, but you change out the audience every month. And then there's the other side of it, like what audiences aren't catered to within the soyosphere.
I wonder, do you think there are any now that aren't being catered? Because I don't think so, but I'm sure there's some hardcore niche, but I can't think of one.
Well, I think much like I think it was Archwinger who may have mentioned it, or some other dude who lost his mind over on the Red Pill Reddit,
Uh-huh.
that there's a real dearth for guys who are kind of gone through the sidebar, handle all their shit. They've kind of dialed that into where they want to be. They've tailored it and personalized it to their own life, and they're just rolling with it. But when those guys want to have someone to talk to on a more advanced level, they run into this wall of looks money game.
Basically, where do the guys who have their shit together go?
Yeah, because like from my perspective here, like every time, like I've seen a few cycles go through this space,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like every 6 to 12 months or so, you get a new kind of roster of what was the Batman's Rogues Gallery. Essentially, you change the Rogues Gallery every fucking 6 to 12 months, and it's kind of a meta observation. But most of them come in to give their take on the basics. And it's very rare to see someone come in, give their take on the basics, and not get stuck there.
Or expand on it even. I think that's what
But yeah,
gets me because the basics are the basics, and I get like hearing the same thing worded 20 different ways. It'll sink into 20 different types of people, but nobody seems to have this standing on the shoulder of giants attitude where it's like, okay, Rolo's done this, Athel K's done this, Carl's done this. Now I've got this on top of it. And nobody ever seems to make that leap, which kind of
no, I think part of the reason, because that leap is you're essentially killing yourself by doing it. Because you have to kind of push yourself farther and you have to be original. On top of the fact that you're kind of leaving the majority of the audience behind.
oh, I see what you're getting at. Actually, it's
Because
funny. I
let's
noticed
say,
that with Peterson when he was doing his stuff, he got his research, he was doing his talks, and then he got famous, and then he kind of just stopped doing more research, and then he just had to run through that cycle of the talking points and the points that he knew about.
yeah, and I think that it makes perfect sense to do that from a marketing perspective. Because let's say, like, the number of guys who actually got their shit together, went through everything, and then came out the other side and are pretty happy with where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
uh, they're not going to, that percentage is always going to be less than the guys who are just getting divorce raped, the guy who just had their girl cheat on them, the guys who just thought they were the perfect male specimen but couldn't get any play, so they went and joined PUA hate or rented a truck or something.
Which is so weird too, because like I don't mean to toot my own horn, but my dudes in Patreon, they're just quietly succeeding getting shit done. And there's some new guys coming in, but the old guys then are kind of helping them. And I'm noticing they're kind of, at least, and I can't speak for them, some of them in the chat, they'll let you know, but they're kind of wanting, okay, so where's my Red Pill content? Where's Red Pill movies? Where's Red Pill music? You know what I mean? The kind of thing, where's stuff that's made to appeal to a guy who's got his shit together?
Okay, one man's way, very good job, but you need a 24-year-old, a 26-year-old, and a 27-year-old.
Yeah, you got to make yourself a flush. Is there a word for that? Some kind of like pussy flush or something? I don't even know.
A pussy
But yeah,
flush is something else, man.
oh, fair enough. But yeah, you see what I mean though? Like, do you remember One Man's Way? It was what, a year ago when we first saw you on here, buddy? I think so, wasn't it, Carl? And
Yeah, he's been there for a year. I think a year ago was when he went through his divorce.
Yeah, had to get the ring back from the fiance and that all that hullabaloo now. And now he was living in a place that was hard, the family troubles. And now look at that Avi. Look at how happy he looks. 4 plates, all young girls, as a blue collar guy. So it turns out the money thing doesn't matter so much, or the status thing doesn't matter so much. Just got to be a man, and then girls are like, "Oh, that's nice. That's a refreshing
Well,
change."
I think that was kind of what came in, and I don't want to make this show like the meta show again because I feel like I've been talking nonstop about a fucking meta for over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's just one of those things that it started off, and One Man's Way was kind of our target for like an audience and for what you were trying to accomplish. You weren't like trying to make a guy 6 figures. You weren't trying to get him a Lambo. You weren't trying to get him to fuck models. You were trying to get him into a place where he had his own apartment, uh, owned a pair of jeans that fit and were clean, showered, and got laid.
Yeah,
Those were the 4
attainable
things you were trying.
happiness.
Yeah, and all of those things are, yeah, attainable happiness. That's the best word for it. Not the continuation of misery via moving goalposts.
Oh, that one always. Like, are you referring to that in the way that the pickup, or not the pickup, but like the marketing guys are always like, you got to be better, and nothing's ever good enough? Or are you talking about it in the sense that don't even try because nothing will ever be good enough and those goalposts keep shifting? I think it's now up to you have to be 6'6" to get laid ever.
Well,
The black pillars keep upping.
if I can verbalize this correctly, addiction to those type of marketing hustlers is like a cocaine addiction. Makes you feel good right then and there in the moment. But if you keep buying into those lines, it gets really fucking expensive, and in the end, you're not getting a lot out of it.
Yeah, I think that's the one that gets me. Like a lot of guys are just giving it away. No value. And it's the same problem they had with girls. They'll like overinvest or once they lose her, they'll try fighting harder to win her back, even though she's already moved on to some new dick. It's just this need for guys to like try and repair the sinking ship. And I know psychologically there's some evolutionary reason we did that and we survived because of it. I just don't know what it is. And I've never heard anybody articulate it. And I don't know how to fix it other than just tell them to stop and then hopefully they listen.
I don't know. I kind of came into this mindset about everything that everything is kind of, it's not, you don't own her. It's not your, it's just your turn is a good way of putting it. Everything.
Yeah.
You know what you have now. You know what you've had in the past, but you have no fucking idea what you're going to have in the future. And I was thinking about that because, like you mentioned, the slog and the corporate slog.
Mm-hmm.
And for, let's see, I worked in corporate 15 years total now.
Damn.
But the last 10 before I made the move, it was all kind of sloggy jobs. Because you come in and you're a junior regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And as a junior, your job is basically to make nice PowerPoint slides fast whenever people tell you to. Then you become, some kind of, you can be named a manager, you could be called an analyst, whatever. And then your job is to get the juniors to make pretty slides fast. Then you move up to a senior, and then your goal is to convince the client that those pretty slides are going to make a difference. And then
such a jaded interpretation. I love it.
And then if you move into a partner, your job is to actually convince the people who are buying your bills that those pretty slides actually made a difference.
So what position is the point where you actually have to do something? Like produce something?
Generally, like the top couple.
Uh-huh.
But for me, it's more like you have different skill sets. Like the partner doesn't really write or produce anything, but they're mostly doing sales, or they're the guy who comes in to kind of dazzle the client to get the business,
right?
And the let's see what it called, the managers is usually a term they use for the level below partner. And once you're in that level, you're kind of like a mix between the guy who's getting the slides done and the guys who are at the top who sold the things. You're kind of the coordinator between that, and you're usually the direct guy that interfaces with the client.
Right. I'm a people person.
And then you have the juniors and the associates, who are essentially the people who are producing everything. It depends a little bit on what kind of business you're in, though. Like,
Well, I'm just
I always
assuming
found,
general corporate Fortune
well,
500
general
type
corporate,
stuff.
it's like in corporate, you're going to have your management levels. So you're going to have like your middle managers, and below them you have your team leaders. And then over the middle manager, you generally have some kind of executive position, or you have another row of middle managers again. It depends on corporate structure. But generally, anyone in a management position is not producing anything themselves for the most part. They're at best they're aggregating the production of others and presenting that to the next person up in line, and they're coordinating with people of their own level within the company.
Yeah, which is very similar to the military hierarchy. I mean, you have for the Navy your ordinary seaman, your able seaman, and your leading seaman. The ordinary seaman, it's basically all the shit jobs. Able seaman, he's just proven he knows how to use all the equipment, and he's given the shit jobs. A team lead will be the leading seaman, and he kind of directs all the lemmings around. The master seaman, he generally coordinates with the other master seamans from other departments and handles uh, more responsible roles. But for the most part, it's like making sure their parts fit with everybody else's parts. And then you have your watch supervisors and that. And for the most part, they're the ones greasing the wheels behind the scenes to let you get done. And then they come in if things go sour. But it's very similar, just more structured.
Yeah, it's the same thing in most hierarchies. It ends up becoming that way. And it's part of my thing was just being able to slog my way through that for about 8 years or so. Because on every level, you're building some competence, right?
Ideally.
And ideally, your goal is to either move up in your company or make a lateral move. Well, not necessarily lateral, but to make a move to a different organization, because it can be very difficult to make that hump from associate to junior.
Mm-hmm.
No, and from associate to manager, that leap is kind of hard, and the leap from manager to partner is very difficult.
Well, yeah,
A lot
because
of
the
people
job
actually,
differences are very wide, so it's harder to get enough. I don't know how to say it, qualifications to show whoever you're interviewing for that you're able to handle the next position.
well, that plus you always want to have less partners
Yeah,
because
because they make the most money.
well, you can fire an associate, but a partner is actually a part owner in the company.
By the way, this fills my heart with joy when Man's Ways is 5. Do you know how many people I've heard they're like, yeah, I don't watch anybody else anymore? We're literally fixing the sphere by removing the content creator viewer pipeline.
Oh, I do think there's actually something. There's something a limitable man told me really early. Like, don't focus on having the biggest audience. Focus on having the most invested audience.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's a perfect reason why.
Well, the reason for it is that it's the same reason why I do these occasional purges. Like, I had a period here where I was blocking everyone who kept retweeting politics into my feed.
Uh-huh.
I had a period right now where I'm muting everyone who's bragging about being able to go to the gym. Then that last one is just that last one is just out of bitterness. But the main reason for doing it is just to like, if you can pick between having 1,000 followers who buy all your shit and 10,000 out of which 10% buy all your shit, you sell the same number of shit, but you get a lot more noise in your feed.
True. A lot less fickle on the one side, a lot better quality.
Well, you said it at some point too, like you want to talk to a person, you don't want to talk to a brand.
I fucking hate that, dude. I hate it so much. And there's so many people who like get confused when I'm just like basically shut them out. I'm like, I don't care.
And it's kind of like, I think Ed Lattimore is kind of like the perfect example of how to balance the two. Because there's a very, very small gap between who Ed is as a person,
yeah,
and who Ed Lattimore the brand is.
True. I do notice that like his main tweet is very like on brand, platitude stuff, but then the stuff that he engages with or any of his comments, that's Ed.
Yeah.
So it's always good. But at least it's consistent.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that have been pissing me off about Twitter. It's just like when you get I forgot to tweet out that we're actually live. There we go. But the thing that gets me the most is the people who are like one note bangers.
Oh, they have one thing and that's all they talk about.
They have that one thing, and every single message is going to be about that. Every single interaction is about that. Everything about them is about that. I just find that to be kind of annoying.
Of course it is. It's because it gets boring fast, and it's like the tour. It's like the opposite of the Turing machine or the Turing test. It's like, is that even a person on the other end? You have no idea, and so it's just like when you're responding to automated like Twitter accounts that don't even have a person on the other end. It's functionally no different, and I don't feel like yelling at my TV on the internet. I don't know
No, and
about
it's
you.
kind of what pissed me off too. It's because like I actually bought some Bitcoin this week.
Okay.
And I did that just because, well, I was rebalancing my portfolio for this month. And I had a little bit of money that I was like, okay, where do I put this? And
Literally had nowhere else.
like the options were like gold mine in Africa and Bitcoin. And the way I figured it, a gold mine in Eritrea can't be worse than Bitcoin.
At least less chance of somebody losing their hand over it, right?
Yeah, so then I just kicked that stuff in there and just let's see what happens. And the reason was, funnily enough, because I had a couple of those OneNote bangers that got in my mentions on every tweet, like buy Bitcoin. It's like, does anyone know what drill to buy? Buy Bitcoin. Does anyone know what works better in like a Greek salad? Black olives, calamatas, or green olives? Buy
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
Oh, dude, that's not even like a Bitcoin thing. I was noticing that on like just dating and sexual strategy stuff too. Like Rich, he would keep showing me. He's like, dude, you got to check out these Facebook groups, and he showed me this one, Order of Men. I actually did a post on it where every guy would post. He'd basically take his life like a jigsaw puzzle of shit, and he'd like, oh, okay, my wife does this, she does that, she does that, and dump it on the table. It's like, all right, guys, how do I make this into the puzzle? And there was always the one guy in every one of those threads who didn't matter what it was about. He's like, this is time for my pet project to shine. It's always like the MGTOW talking points, where have all the good men gone and 6 foot, six, whatever. But it was always that. It's like they weren't listening. They were just waiting for their turn to jam whatever they got into that square peg into the round hole. It's completely annoying. And I've noticed it not just dating, not just Bitcoin, but everywhere. Even just like view any Trump tweet and right underneath it, you see some asshole who's like, here's my thing that has nothing to do with what's being talked about.
Yeah, for me, I just find the whole thing. It's kind of that's why I started cleaning up my Twitter feed too, because like it was getting too noisy.
Yeah. I
And
can't
the way,
follow
like,
a lot of people for that same reason. It's brutal.
well, I think I follow about 230 people. And the main reason for that is like, I already know that eating steaks is good. I've already been on a low carb diet for an extended period of time. I don't need someone to sell me their blueprint for a low carb diet.
This is true.
I already know how to dress reasonably, so the few people I actually follow when it comes to that stuff are people I actually enjoy when they talk about other shit.
Yeah. I was just looking at
Yeah.
mine, 93. And there's a lot of them that I really shouldn't be following. There was that one that did that hit piece on Rollo. I was kind of curious because that was her second one. But it just turns out she's on the Anthony Johnson pipeline. He keeps paying to get his press out there, and she's just shilling.
Oh,
So that's kind
really?
of neat. Yeah, I
Kind of
shouldn't have
funny
read
though.
Ryan
If it,
Holiday's book, man. It's the worst thing ever because now every time I see any like media outrage, I'm just like thinking about the behind the scenes grifting that they're trying to do to get it to be to make me angry.
yeah, but that's an obvious thing. It's like kind of I tweeted out yesterday something like the only reason why populism is bad is if you're part of a rich group that have an agenda that's contrary to the public interest,
Hmm.
or your population is retarded.
Well, we both know which one that is.
And the next comment under there was something like, well, imagine thinking that the elite doesn't have an agenda. And it's like, everyone has a fucking agenda, man. I mean,
Yeah.
like, can we just get to the point where we stop being like, yeah, but my agenda is good? Probably not for everyone.
Oh, that's standard like Redditor attitude. Like everything that I'm thinking is factual, and everything you're thinking is just Fox News or some crap like that. It drives me nuts because there's no self awareness behind those statements. It's literally just I'm right. Like you ask somebody, how do you know this? I love that question. How do you know this? Whenever they give you some weird assertion that makes no sense, and 9 times out of 10 they just repeat what they already said.
Yeah,
I'm
what was
like,
that
I
line?
heard you. I just don't know how you know it.
Yeah, it's the thing with the sourcing thing. It's just like you have to, slog through everything over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and for me, that becomes tired. That's the most tiresome slog I've had to deal with lately because I've kind of got my corporate thing worked out, girl thing worked out. Well, workout thing is kind of on a hiatus because of gym closure.
Yeah, but I mean,
Uh,
it's worked out for the most part. At least here, I got the like I said, I got the power blocks, and I'm doing those. I'm sure you're doing push-ups in the shower.
yeah, funnily enough, not in the shower. That's a bit slippery.
Oh, fair enough. What kind of man are
Okay,
you?
so let's see. FT 500 structure, 2 to 3 levels of analyst, associate and senior manager, associate senior director, like 3 levels of VPs, and the C level actually making decisions. Well, yes and no. The C levels aren't really making decisions. They're being asked, they're being told what decisions to make by consultants
Mm-hmm.
or board members or a combination thereof.
I've
Like we're
never
kind of
understood the
past.
board structure.
Well, we're kind of past like the time when you had like a CEO like Jack Welch, who was the general of his ship.
Mm-hmm.
You have very few of those guys left. Jamie Dimian in what bank is he in now? And Blankfein and Goldman is another one. But you have very few CEOs these days that are of that old school. Like, I'm the captain of this ship. What I say goes, and I'm going down with this fucking ship. Those are kind of gone now. So what you have now, for the most part, you have C-level groups, and then you have boards, and then you have a bunch of external consultants recommending the direction of everything within the company. And on every level of the corporate structure, you have consultants because every manager, every director, every C-level, and every board have their own choice of consultants.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you
Here's my
that board
question
structure,
for you, though.
yeah,
For the consulting, obviously, you were talking about like the McKinsey, Deloitte, PwC, those kind of guys. Are
yeah.
they driving business, or is business using them to drive what they want? Like, you said your choice consultants. Are they telling me what I want to hear, or are they just telling me what to do?
A bit of both. I've seen both situations. Most of the time, actually, it's companies like Gartner telling people what to do.
Oh yeah, fair point. Fair point.
Because
Gardner at
the
least is trying to do some research with it.
well, here's how it works: is like Gartner does some research, 8 consultancies pick up on it, they pitch it to their clients. Their clients may or may not implement it.
If you guys are wondering, this sounds an awful lot like people reading Rollo's book in their Toyota Tacoma and then selling consulting services. You'd be right, sir. You'd be exactly right. The Gartner of the sphere.
Well, you do have that pyramid, like in everything except how the company's actually managed,
Yeah.
and it depends a lot on different companies, I guess. But for a lot of them, everyone who works there is doing the day to day. And if they need to change something, let's say they're not hitting their KPIs or something, then they bring in a consultancy. So either they're going to be picked up by like the manager responsible for that area or by his boss to figure out why it's not working.
Right.
And then because this kind of permeates down the organizational structure up depending on, because very few people are comfortable putting their balls on the line anymore, including like the C-level.
That's the weirdest part of it, though. It's like Sinek talked about that, the evolutionary history of like leadership, and Rollo talks about it with the authority without responsibility. The idea is like they get first cut of meat, but they also like front of the line when a danger comes to the tribe. I think a lot of the distrust of like institutions of that is kind of coming from that exact attitude, and I get why it's there. It's basically a very risk averse position, and nobody lost their job by doing what a consultant told them to. But you see what I mean, though? Then it's hard to inspire anything from anybody below you when you already know the guy is not taking responsibility for his leadership position, but he's getting all the benefits of the leadership position.
And it's also the problem with a lot of leadership positions. Like I'm not sure if I'm going to call him a retard or a genius because I'm not really sure what that person would fall into.
Yeah.
But this idea that leadership and management is its own discipline.
Oh, I agree. I think it totally is.
I don't. I think it's bunk.
So what do you think is what do you think it is then?
Well, I think leadership skills, some of them can be trained, but some of them are, let's say, genetic or inherent.
Okay.
And
Oh,
those
I see what
things
you're getting
with
at.
risk tolerance, the ability to stand firm on what you think is the right direction, your willingness to be uncompromising, pursuing your views, kind of the Steve Jobs or Bill Gates approach. It's much different from learning, how to do a board presentation, how to, uh, make stakeholders happy, how to spin things out to the media.
How to herd the cats underneath you. See,
Yeah, so I think
I used to think it was trained, but then my old lady brought up a really good position. Is that she prefers to work for men as opposed to women? She goes, she can't. I can't hate working with. I hate working with women in general, and it makes sense. It has to be innate then, because I mean, stats even back that up, wasn't it? 90% of women prefer a male boss. 90% of men prefer a male boss.
yeah, something like that. And like Corvo Corsair asks here, like, where does the accountability lie for bad decisions? And in a
It
corporation,
doesn't.
well, yeah, exactly, because everyone's pushing that off themselves. And I kind of became very aware of it because I read a couple of memoirs by people who have had leadership experience and were often referenced in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And I did what I would normally do if I was to hire a new associate or something like that. I just went in and said, let's look at this person's CV and let's look at the companies they worked for based on their position and what were their results of them being there. And you had some of them. Like, it's almost like there's a skill involved in selling yourself as a competent and efficient leader,
Right.
despite all the evidence of your employment history dictating that the opposite has to be the fucking case.
Baffle them with bullshit, dude.
And
100%.
that was kind of the interesting thing to me because I like the idea I like the idea of I like the idea of saying that you have to be accountable for the area that you are responsible for. And the way I translate that into corporate is to say that you are responsible for managing your boss, you are responsible for managing your stakeholders and your cats. But you're also responsible for managing laterally. Like if you have someone who can't herd their cats in a different department, you have to step in there and actually work them for that reason.
Yeah, yeah, all that stuff. Or there's a bottleneck at your side of things because somebody on their side of things doesn't want to do their job.
Yeah, and I think for the most part, that's kind of the slog you kind of accept when you go into any kind of organization. That's why it's always going to be easier to be a one man operation
Mm-hmm.
with that coordination thing and not being that reliant on cats. On the other hand, you're going to have that issue if you work in as a solo, let's say you work as a solo consultant or you run your own thing, like you told me that yourself, like you get just as much shit now, if not more.
But it's dealable. That's the thing. I guess it's a level of control, and I think that's the difficulty with guys and their slogs. Like I can use examples of I'm sure most kids, at least my generation, like the late millennials or early ones, whatever ones are the older ones, where your home life sucks and you cannot wait to move out, but you're like 16, so you have to wait for 2 years, finish high school, and then you're out. And there's a slog right there. Same thing, same idea of like you have no control over your situation. The situation is just untenable. There's zero you can do to fix it, but it's got an expiry date. Or for example, for your corporate one, arguably, I mean, I think you were telling me earlier, and remind me if I'm right or not, where once you start getting up into like director roles, then a lot of the day-to-day sloggy bullshit kind of goes away and you end up with that new set of interpersonal issues. Is that a fair way of summing it?
Yeah, I think it's a once you get to a certain level, it starts to become actually very enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I would say that's somewhere around that when you're at like the top three echelons, it starts to become very manageable. But it depends on what you prefer doing. Some people love being down in the nitty gritty and dealing with all the details and just being locked in the room working on their thing.
I hear that a lot, but I also see every guy, like, you know how every every like IT department or every business has that one guy. It's like if we lose him, we're dead. That guy always hates his job. He just comes in, he checks it out, he's fully switched on. I never see him get moved or promoted, and he gets treated horribly. I have a hard time believing that guys, judging by how much they complain, actually like being there. I think they just prefer to be a necessity plow horse than a non-necessitous plow horse.
I think that's a big part too. Plus, a lot of those guys are compensated very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, they have to be at this point. It's
Well,
I
like,
guess it's got a security to it.
But what they should do, from my perspective, is they should tell their job, hey, listen, I'm going to quit. I'm handing in my notice. I'll be starting up my own consultancy, and you can hire me at this rate.
Dude, that would be brilliant. Because think about
Because he,
oh, sorry, go.
well, I know a couple of guys who did that because one of their strengths was they were kind of the organizational memory in their department because they'd been there for like 15, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've been through the entire like digital transformation the company did. They knew every iteration, every small nuance, they knew everything.
Right.
And if they not only would the company productivity be hurt drastically, they would have to hire like 8 people to replace that one dude.
And even then, it would take God knows how long to get everybody up to speed.
So it was much
memory
better
takes
to
time
just
to build.
a bit cheaper to pay this guy like 300 grand a year and let him do his thing as a consultant.
And I know a lot of guys too worry about that, but if you think about the costs, like the back end cost of an employee, you know, your benefit package, your everything, just straight up paying them for job without any of that worry, like the consulting side, it's amazing how much more money you can be worth once you realize all those little, you know, government handout type benefits are gone. It's like, that's why, again, I disagree with Clary on this one, where he talks about how chicks are taking over corporate and let them. I don't think they are. I think guys are just becoming contractors and consultants because they don't want, you know, daycare in the school. They don't want all the perks and all the benefits and all that expensive crap. They just want a paycheck for their work and then to go home and they'll spend it as they see fit. And I keep seeing that. And it's even like my first company when I got out of the military, they were paying 60 grand. And this is like a Fortune 500 kind of company. They were paying 60 grand for mid-level like manager types. Meanwhile, the contractors were making about 150. Everybody's doing the same job, and for the most part, the managers didn't really do their job well or know their job well, hence the consultants. But the consultants just kind of get in there, did things. They didn't really have to play the corporate culture. It was actually pretty clever. And I can imagine for a lot of guys who are first starting out in the corporate world and they find, what's that communist thing here? It's like they pay me like crap. They treat me like crap. They're taking all these kind of all these advantage of us in so many ways because they know I don't have any other options right now. And I'm like, sometimes that's just a slog where you have to put in enough hours to be able to get some leverage. And that was kind of like where I was going with this. Same thing with like the business channel. You're back now, Carl?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the one thing I noticed about this, which was awesome. So like I was expecting, you start your online business, this thing here. I was assuming the first year was going to be lean. So I saved up and had enough for 2 years of like lean startup. You know, the fuck you fund.
Yeah, it's fair enough.
Sure enough, that first year was a slog, like, you know, 300 videos, which I guess is a lot, especially since there's only 52 weeks in a year. And now it's getting to a point where it's a little more comfortable. And then, you know, same with you. You were, after your ex-wife thing, you just buried yourself in your work and it was all slog. And now you're at the point, well, I'd say where you could take it easy, but now you're working even worse. So I don't even know what to go with you.
We had kind of had that talk. Well, I'm not sure if you had that on air when we did Clary's thing earlier in the week. It's like last week you were talking about full digital nomad, then they threw a better contract at you, and now you're going to go gung ho on that.
Yeah,
and the thing is, I don't see those two as exclusive options,
which is good.
Because the way I see it, if you get a decent product portfolio going online, you can just leave that up. And then you can do your other things. And that's kind of why I've had this argument with like the entrepreneur side of Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather own 30% of 3 companies than own and operate 100% outright.
Yeah, it's diversified. It's better against the risk of any one thing going down.
Oh, this has nothing to do with diversification.
Oh, so what's your issue on it then? Just that one of
I
them might
just
take off, or
No, it's like if I'm owning three companies, I get dividends every year and I don't have to do shit other than attend two board meetings.
so what's the difference between that and the one company then?
Then you're going to have to be more involved usually if you're kind of the entrepreneur, owner, operator. Most
Oh, I
people who
see
do
what you're
that
going with.
don't have they don't know when to check out. They usually have to be kicked the fuck out.
But I think those are the guys that get hooked on the slog. They like the idea of, that story that all entrepreneurs tell themselves where they were born poor and they were raised off of milk bread and now they've made themselves into something, and then they like that idea of, nothing but my own two hands have built this empire. And in reality, it's just you happen to be of the right age for the .com boom or
Well, to be honest, like one of my favorite entrepreneurs is a guy I've spent a lot of time with, and he kind of hit right on the mark with his second core company he tried setting up when he was like 18, 19, 20.
oh, really?
Yeah, and then he got to be like 26, 27, 28,
Yeah.
and his company was taking off well enough that he was like, okay, you know what? I've got good people working for me here. I'll just get someone to do all this log shit I don't want to do. He can do all that admin shit. And then I'll move on to a new position within the company where all I do is find new ventures for me to have fun with.
It's pretty enlightened, especially for a guy who did it so young.
And I kind of like that approach because I get bored doing the same thing over and over again. That's why I kind of prefer consultancy or advisor positions over, normal positions within the corporate sphere. Because in the corporate sphere, you get put on a track and you kind of have to stick on a track. Whereas in a lot of consultancies, they don't want you on that track. They don't want you doing the same project over and over again. They want you to do different shit
Yeah.
because that
Well,
makes you a lot more sellable.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and at the very least, even if you were on the same track, every 6 months, a year, 2 years, you're at some place like a completely different venue doing it. So that either way, it offers like, and I'm with you on that. Like dude, I've picked up and moved everything and restarted life like 4 times already. Even I'm still surprised I could do 12 years in the military without getting bored with it. But every 3 years they would move me to a different unit. So it was never really a 12-year career. It was more like 4 different sets of careers.
And I think that's kind of how to deal with it. But I mean, there's no denying that. Let's say the first year of those transfers were good for you, and the other two were slogs.
Right.
Because I've kind of noticed that whenever you've done something, at least for me, whenever I've done something for like 2, 3 years, a lot of it starts to become routine.
Oh, 100%.
And a lot of the things like in corporate, even at like the highest levels, a lot of what you're doing is going to be various forms of doing business cases, writing project proposals, doing presentations, going out around and getting buy-in, and negotiating with potential either suppliers or partners. So it's interesting work, but it's also very often a lot of it's the same. Let's say corporate contracts, for instance. Usually they're the same fucking contract with a different legal firm's name on it and like different attachments.
Yeah. Oh, dude, that was the part I liked about that is that once you got a template, you basically had 90% of what you needed. Make a couple tweaks and you're good to go. And then double check that you don't have the wrong company's name somewhere on like page 3. That's always embarrassing. Caught a vendor doing that once. Times. That was funny.
Yeah, that, and I had a vendor once who pulled up the presentation he was giving to another company right before us.
Oh.
And the funniest thing about that, he had us listed as a reference, but he still hadn't gotten the contract signed.
So how do you handle that? Do you bring it up or do you just kind of like ignore it, help them save face?
It depends on the vendor and how well I know them, because I habitually give everyone I give shit to.
Yeah.
So I didn't know him that well, so I didn't give him that much shit. But it's always funny that way.
Yeah, I
enjoyed little you have those, like but you have to kind of take those as those are the things that break up the slog. And the same thing with take lifting, for instance. Most of the time when you get decently up there with how much you can lift, you're essentially going to be doing the same lifts over and over again with no major progress for weeks or months.
Yep. The plateau's a bitch. But
Like
that's the thing.
Russians
That's why I
used
like
to,
treating it as routine. Because then I don't even think of it as a slog. Then it's just something you do kind of autopilot while you work on something that's more interesting. I can't think of like a workout equivalent right now, other than maybe you always add like your one thing you like, or for me, it was like running, trying to get my 5K time down. And even then, I'm not the fastest, but getting it down to 27 minutes was like an accomplishment for me. And then my buddies would laugh about their 15-minute one. I'm like, yeah, fucking clearance divers.
well, I'm not sure how to put it, but I think it's a lot easier to kind of get distracted into other things because the slog, like it or not, is something that's productive for you.
Yeah.
Like the way Russians used to break weightlifting plateaus was to just do the exact lift with the exact weight for months on end until they could finally lift more.
Just plow through it.
Yeah, that's the Russian method. It's never fails, just throw more work on it and just never let up.
Now, here's my question for you. I'm doing the pivot to the next point here. So that makes sense in a lot of things. In business, it makes sense. In working out, it makes sense. Relationships, not so much. If you start treating your relationship like a slog when your girl's checked out and you think it's just putting more effort in, you end up like working on something that's just never going to happen. And I think for a lot of guys, understanding the slog from a corporate perspective, from a military perspective, from a working out perspective, very easy. But then understanding how that set of tools doesn't translate into relationships over. That's the part there that I find kind of a fascinating thing. And
Yeah,
what
you're
other
going to be more
examples
of
are there?
authority. Well, you're going to be more of an authority on that than I am because you're the LTR whisperer.
Still, you've had more marriages than me, so at this point I like hearing back. I don't know, my thought on it is a lot of guys talk about and they always brag about, their company makes this and that when they're in there like, hey, my wife doesn't fuck me. What do I do? And I'm like, all right, so clearly the wife's not like business because if it was, you'd be crushing that too. Now I don't know if there is an equivalent anywhere that kind of matches like the sexual marketplace, relationships, one night stands, all that stuff. I think it's a completely separate set of skills because there's no guarantee. Like anybody can back out at any time. There's no effort involved. A lot of it is outside of your control. Like the girl's desire for you, while you can influence it, is generally something that you can't force upon them.
Well, I also think guys have this way of introducing problems when there really isn't one. Like, let's say you were diagnosing that if a girl is checked out of the relationship, the sex thing is the first thing that pops up.
Yeah.
But you have to kind of look at that in from a context, I think, personally. Like, let's say there something else going on that doesn't necessarily mean the relationship, but there's something else around her fucking things up.
Right.
Because I haven't experienced it myself, but I've seen it in a couple of friends' relationships where, like, one guy, his girl just started working way too fucking much.
Right.
Not because she was unhappy with the relationship, but because she had a very hard time saying no to her boss when her boss told her, hey, can you come in on Saturday? She was like, yeah, of course I can come in. And she'd go in, but she'd also come home at night, fall asleep instantly, etc.
Yeah, and the issue
And that
there is
didn't
just
make,
not able to set boundaries.
yeah, so that was something they had to work on. And then you have other issues like one girl had a mom who was nuts.
One girl.
No,
All
a lot
girls.
of them do, but in this specific case, there was one of the girls that had a problem with her mom being nuts. So whenever her mom would call and she felt obligated to talk to mom, and whenever she talked to mom, she'd be in a mood for 2 days because her mom was being a cunt.
Yeah.
At that point, you can't really, in my opinion, step in and quote unquote solve the problem. You just kind of have to roll with those punches because everyone has some crazy family shit that the other party just has to deal with.
Yeah.
And I think in those situations, if you saw that as the girl checking out of the relationship and you pushed harder, they would pull away.
Oh, easily. And if you tried to fix it, same thing, because it's then you're trying to get between her and her mom. And obviously, she may complain about her, but she keeps coming back up to that trough of negativity. So clearly, there's interest there.
Yeah, then what would you say are the main signs of a girl checking out?
Honestly, main signs like sex is the easiest one. Sex is the absolute easiest one because nothing. There's you know how Rolo says the only agency a girl has is her sexuality.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knows how deep that rabbit hole goes on that one. Like it's hysteric bonding, something we were just talking about, for example, in the Patreon talk. It's a condition where, let's say, a girl cheats on her husband or whatever, and the other guy doesn't want to date her, and the husband, she's going to lose him. The idea is that, like, her branch swing didn't go off well. A girl starts panicking. They start getting what they would like an extreme case of dread. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to be end up with nothing. Or when the divorce isn't going well in her favor or whatever. And usually what'll happen, and this has been common, at least including myself, like a good dozen people, the girl starts fucking like an info. Absolutely. All the time. Everywhere. Anything's on the table. And a lot of guys will treat that as if like, I solved the problem. Now it's exactly that girl I wanted. And then we kind of realized after, 3-4 guys get through, it's like, this is a temporary situation. This is like the female version of the anger phase. So right now, if you're not establishing like the standard stuff, establish your boundaries, make sure you got options, keep your value in place. Eventually this, high will wear off. And then you're just going to go back to the same way things were before. You're going to end up more frustrated because you've seen what the promised land looks like and then it got ripped away from you. But yeah, it let me know that sex truly is like the first indication that something's wrong. And you're right. Maybe she's tired because she's working a bunch because she can't say no. In that case, it's teaching her how to make boundaries. But then at some point you're like, if she can't set boundaries because she knows it makes me happy, how invested is she? And there's always that point where a guy has to make that hard decision. And this is why I don't think corporate translates well to relationship, because obviously corporate's all about removing as much responsibility from you as possible and offloading it to everybody else. But in this one, it's really got a buck stops here vibe to it. And there's nothing you can do other than like make a decision and be the bad guy. And most times you're going to be the bad guy to somebody once you make a decision and stick to it. You have to be okay with it.
Yeah, but my general stance is just, this was something I took from you, that relationships are a woman's responsibility.
Right?
Yeah, like your job as a man is to maintain your value, to maintain the leadership, make sure you're getting what you want out of the relationship. But making sure it's working, that's on the woman. It's like I saw this great meme the other day that never let your man leave the house hungry or horny, because there are always hosts out there with sandwiches.
I like that one. That's clever. Oh.
And one of the things I kind of noticed is that once a girl stopped doing the extra shit,
yeah,
that's when you should take a sign that, okay, there's something up here. And I think a lot of guys jump to conclusions like, okay, this is something I did, or it's something I didn't do, and they try to kind of nerve wrack. It's the same thing they do when they start doing game. Whenever they have whenever they have a blowout, they do the mind reading thing, or they have a blowout and they make excuses, etc., etc., etc. And from my perspective, that's just, don't do that shit. Just every time you start having those thoughts, hit the gym.
I love that's the answer for so many things. Are you having anxiety attacks? Hit the gym. Are you trying to read minds? Hit the gym. It's basically go do something that I guess that's because you can't think about anything else when you have like 150 pounds over your head. You just have to focus on not dropping it on your face.
Yeah, my grandpa used to say, whenever I was pissed at your grandma, I used to go and chop wood. You can't swing a huge ass
cords in the back.
Well, you can't swing a huge ass fucking axe without being focused on what you're doing. You're going to chop a leg off or some shit.
Yeah, fair enough. But I like that though. Gronk really is on to something. We're just like, stop thinking so damn much. Like overthinking it is just not helpful.
And overthinking is a luxury, in my opinion, because having the free time to overthink means you have it pretty well.
Yeah. But at the same time, Like, how can you complain about your marriage when there's kids starving in Africa? That's the argument there. And it's
Yeah,
obviously,
that's not the point of it. The point of it is that if you're busy, like I had this whole argument with the whole like, when should I text her back? When should I do this? When should I do that? Well, if you're busy, you'll end up doing it when you have time for it. If you're not busy, you'll do it as soon as possible. So your goal isn't to, sit there and wait for 25 minutes to send that text. It's to have something to do for those 25 minutes, so you're not sitting there looking at your phone twiddling your fucking thumbs.
yeah. And like that's like the 2/3 rule is there. It's the fake it till you make it thing. So you at least, and I think that was where pickup had like good points, but it didn't go far enough. It shows you exactly what somebody who's busy and has better things to do with his time would do, but they fake it, which is fine when you're starting out. If you're like an 18-year-old who's just starting pickup, you're not going to have fuck all to do. So at least then you have an idea what it should look like. But then, like you were saying earlier with the marketers, how they're kind of they want to catch you in that 18-month anger phase bit there. That's all they push because they know it's too much effort to get you to have a busy life. Sad, I guess.
Yeah, and generally, dealing with like the complete train wrecks, like I had like that ending section to building value, where I kind of imagine like the most train wrecked fucking dude ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like fat, living in the boondocks, gaming addiction, drug addiction, alcohol addiction, at no job, not anything.
Right.
And kind of like, okay, here is how you want to attack that and break that down into manageable tasks that even this fucker can do to make progress. It's not going to be fast, it's not going to be easy, but it's going to get some progress out of it because all the time you're just focusing on whatever's in control of your space right now.
Yep. Hitting the easiest manageable things one piece at a time. Was it compound interest? I think is what you called it, where everything you do will eventually make everything else you do in the future a little bit easier and a little bit easier.
Yeah, and to kind of byline them back to corporate, you always have that when you come in on like one of the lower levels.
Mm-hmm.
You always have the guy who could run the company better than the board of directors or the CEO. He just so happens to be working like a low-level gig in some service desk or something.
Right.
And if only they saw how brilliant he was, he could run the company so much better.
Good old midwit.
And the same thing with like the people who sit there and they yell at the coach during a football game. Like, yeah, obviously, Cletus, you played football in high school for 6 months. You know how to run the game better than this guy's been doing it for 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a certain trap you get into with those people because they're not willing to look at themselves from a realistic standpoint. Like all of us look in the mirror a little bit like, yeah, I look okay, even though you're a bit too heavy, or, yeah, my hair looks fine, despite the fact that it looks like you just got out of bed and had a quick dog wash or some shit. So based on that, we gloss over a lot of these things that we should just slog through. Like it's not that much effort to improve a lot of these small things. And once you get those out of the way, you can start working on bigger things.
But see, I like how you have a healthy centerline approach to that because you see the guys that are like, yeah, I'm perfect the way I am, completely oblivious to any of their major easy failings. And then you have the guys that nothing is ever good enough, where they treat it's like a body dysmorphia for guys, where they keep trying to cut at like 140 pounds. I need to cut to get that 6-pack.
Yeah, or the guys who are like, yeah, I'm only 5'6", then 320 pounds, 6% body fat, but I really need to get bigger, man.
Yeah, exactly. And both of those guys miss the self-awareness, either like too much bravado or too little. And I find that's why I like the slog, because then you're not thinking about how it makes you feel. Do I feel like I'm perfect? Do I feel like I'm not perfect? You're like, yeah, whatever. It's just work. I go in to do these lifts. I want to hit this very achievable metric, like 15. What's the American average? Like a 42-inch waist and
something like that.
pounds, something like that.
Yeah, if you're at the 36-inch waist at 220, you're already way ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have like an attainable goal. Top 20% usually gives a good enough goal. I think it was you that actually did that. You remember that? I think it was Twitter where you put the stats of a top 20% guy in the US. And when you look at those, they look so Like the bar is so low for the top 20%. It kind of makes you wonder how everybody's bitching about hypergamy. It really does.
Yeah. It's the same kind of discussion I have whenever some, I would call them midwit, but it would be an insult to midwits. Brings up the whole thing. Well, the top 1%. Well, globally, everyone in Western Europe and North America is the top 1%. Be more specific.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you look at the top 1% only within America and the Western Europe, you end up with a different top 1%. But even that's attainable.
Yeah.
It's when you get into the top 0.1 or 2%, that's what a lot of these scam artists are selling. Things become rather unrealistic.
Completely unrealistic. Remember Delicious Tacos? I think he put it best. The sphere has gone from here's how to pick up girls to if you don't have a Lamborghini and $1 million by 23, you've failed in life or something like that. It was damn clever.
Yeah, well, it's on point too, and I think that just kind of it makes it seem as if like I have no problem understanding why guys end up going full blown MGTOW or black pill.
Mm-hmm.
If they're just reeling, let's say they've never gotten laid, they see like, okay, you need to have 6-pack abs, you need to have 6 figures, you need to run your own business, you need a Lambo, and dude is currently sitting in a room in his mom's house, and he's 150 pounds overweight. He works part time at GameStop, and he has none of these things. And he's like, well, if for me to get even close to that, I would have to work my ass off for the next 30 years.
Don't even know where to start.
No idea where to start. And if I fail at attaining what to me is an unrealistic standard, I'm going to be right back where I am now. So why bother trying? Why not just do things I like? I completely get where they're coming from.
Yeah. Oh no, don't get me wrong. I get it. And a lot of guys just quietly do it. And to them, I'm like, whatever. At the very least, they are actually going their own way. It's the ones who try to recruit as many people to join them on their quest for mediocrity. Those are the ones that kind of get to me. It's like, why do you need me to opt into your misery or your coping strategy? I don't like those guys because then they've already shown they can do a slog. Like, you know how hard it is to sit here and bitch about women ain't shit online for like a year straight? It's a lot of work. It's a slog and you can get tired of that. And I'm like, dude, you could have put that to being the best manager at Best Buy and been better off than you are doing this. Or maybe not. Maybe their 8-hour bitch sessions are actually a lot of good revenue generating thing. I don't know. I highly doubt YouTube's monetizing those, but what do I know?
Well, just look at the guys who've been like slogging their way through like 7 years in a miserable marriage.
Yeah,
they can do the slog. They're just kind of scared of pulling the cord on anything. And I get it because like once you get into a comfortable slog and everything becomes routine, it's very comforting in a way because I do think that about, let's say 70% of humanity is 100% focused on maintaining the status quo just the way it is right now.
Well, but I'd go with that for sure.
And that's why you're never going to have major changes. That's why things like elections don't bother me much. Because the only thing that usually changes is like the color next to someone's name and my tax bill. And how much my tax bill changes can go from minimal to even less. So if it doesn't affect me severely, I'm not going to think about it. And I'm always coming back to like this old thing that women make rules for betas and break rules for alphas. Mm-hmm. So let's say we are losing the culture war and men are getting more and more rules heaved on them. Well, the alphas don't have to follow them. No. Just become an alpha instead. It's easier. It's much better than sitting here bitching about waging a culture war you lost 40 fucking years ago.
Oh, I know. Dude, I'm still seeing it. Like I said, that Herb Goldberg book, the, what do they call it? Hold on a sec, I got it here. I haven't read it because my girl called me gay for having it. The Hazards of Being Male, Surviving the Myth of Masculine Privilege. Wrote it in the 70s. Everything here is exactly what guys are talking about today. 70s is almost like 40 years ago, 80, 90, yeah, like 50 years ago since 1970. Not an inch of progress. And meanwhile, there's still MRAs talking about spreading awareness. I'm like, dude, Either you're so bad at awareness that in 50 years nobody knows what you're talking about, or they flat out do know what you're talking about, and you're just spinning your wheels on a slog with no success whatsoever. Either way, you got to change. But it's like you said, the comfortable misery is better than like an exciting chance at success because it's different. It's different is scary. You might fail.
That was kind of something I noticed with my Manosphere hiatus last year.
Mm-hmm.
That once you go out, and even when I was doing like the 50 dates in a month thing,
Yeah. Oh yeah, that one.
what I noticed was like everyone who's the loudest on your Twitter feed is dead fucking wrong.
Yep. They have to be. That's how
Because,
you get engagement.
well, if you look at like there is no war on men in the traditional sense. Like I was still able to go out and run direct game with the 50 different women, and I did not catch a rape charge. I did not catch a fake pregnancy.
Do you still have half your resources?
I still have more, but and all these things are like there is no like socialist takeover. There is no lizard people, and once people, I think people get obsessed with those things because we all like to envision ourselves as the small hero fighting against an unsurmountable conspiracy to end our life or our way of life. And being invested in that and tweeting about that gives you that feel good shit you're missing in your life. And it distracts you from the fact that you're still tweeting from the exact same fucking place you were 5 years ago.
You know my favorite part about all that shit too? Apparently there's billionaire pedos somewhere with their spirit cooking and, murdering things and kidnapping and plans for the New World Order. But the only thing that they have to put in effort to keep down is that one dude in Orlando, Florida, who's gonna bypass the whole thing and find a solution. You notice that's always that like I am the only thing that they need to beat in order to win their power. It's such like a weird center of the universe fantasy of narcissism. So many guys have that.
Well, we went through thousands of years thinking our own planet was the center of the universe.
Yeah, we just downsized that to like I am the center of the universe.
And not necessarily I want to go into that on a meta level, but it's better for you in the long run to take the path less traveled.
Yep.
And to do the hard thing and to actually go out there and try and fix your own life. I brought back to that the white Republican's tweet when he forgot to switch to his alt account.
Oh, I heard about that. So what was that?
He
had like an alt account that was a black transgender something or something?
Gay black dude, and he just posted like, as a gay black dude, Obama didn't really change anything for me. And to be honest, like I don't expect a politician or a bureaucrat or anyone to change anything for me. I expect myself to do that.
Yeah. I was wondering though, how many, like all of a sudden, like what is it? Gay people are like a single percentage point of the population of them, like each like subgroup of them you gets a single percentage point of that. And I'm like, how come they're all on the same subreddit right now? I find it hard to believe. I was pretty convinced that a lot of these people were just making it up, but at least now you can see it.
Well, I just think it comes down to the fact that people are uncomfortable taking responsibility for their own lives and their own misery. And if you're not doing well, it's much easier to blame everyone else. You blame the government, you blame your parents, you blame your coworkers, you blame your stupid boss.
Yeah.
Instead of just saying, okay, you know what, I'm in this situation now because of choices I've made, because of actions I've taken, and then, okay, if I don't want to be here in 5 years, what choices do I have to make? Like they have this great thing about that on Seinfeld. Because George was kind of perpetually miserable. And he had this one episode,
right,
where he, his whole thing was he was going to answer the opposite of what he was going to say, and suddenly everything started going well for him. And I think for those people, what happens is once they've gotten themselves into a rut where they need to kind of work on themselves, but they don't do it. And they have the wrong impulses to make decisions. So what happens is, instead of recalibrating themselves to be more in tune with reality and thinking through their decisions. They just keep following the same habitual decisions that got them in trouble in the first place. And if you never look at yourself honestly, you're never going to be able to figure out, okay, where did I go wrong? What did I do right? And it's kind of the OODA loop. You observe, orient, make a decision, act, and then you're supposed to go back into observe to see, okay, here's what I did. Here was my decision making process. Here is what happened. Okay, how do I influence this incrementally? And once you start doing that, I think that's why like dieting and writing down your calories has such a profound effect on people. Because once they start writing down everything they eat, I think that's the first time they know in their life how much they're actually putting in their mouth.
Dude, that's like a game changer on so many things. Like when I was still doing consulting early, and I think I've mentioned this before, but just having a guy like verbalize what his issue is in his relationship, 80% of guys that were talking to me would break down into tears or at least get like choked up. So it's like a lot, like our ego's ability to gloss over the rough patches in our life is just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Even the military, actually, as soon as you charge a guy with something and have him like talk to you about it, most of the guys would break down into tears. Like they actually had to train us on how to deal with like a sailor crying in your office, which is fucked up, by the way.
Yeah, how's that guy going to handle it when he's being shot at?
Well, to be honest, he'll handle it better because that's the thing. Because it's the theater of it. You want to charge a guy and you don't just start yelling at him because guys like that. If I fuck up and I get yelled at, then like the world makes sense. Instead, what you do, you leave a lot of anticipation. You leave him outside your office. You like check your email for like 10, 15 minutes and he just stands there, at attention waiting for you. You call him in, very quiet. You never shit on him. You just kind of say like you're disappointed. Look, the guy's going to come, give you interrogation. Just, confess to everything. We'll get the summary trial out of the way. We'll get you back to business. But it's like very supportive. And then it's basically guilt tripping the guy. And it's just, I've seen it drive like big men, 200-pound dudes, very muscular, drive them to crying. And then they're like, okay, so yeah, when they cry, don't let them leave the office. Don't tell them everything's going to be okay. Just quietly let them do it. Then once they're done, you push the box of Kleenex towards them. You don't hand them a Kleenex. And you just wait. And then let them start talking first. And it was like, that's something you really got to tell people? They're like, yeah, you'll see. Sure enough, 4 months later, guy in my office crying. Over weed.
Christ.
Hey, man, guys have triggers. We got really good triggers. Although I guess we see that anyway with the guys paying for outrage online marketing.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking about that, like how easy it is to sell something by calling someone a cunt.
Well, not just that. Like you got to sell it like their core, the thing that they are proud of the most in their life is a cunt. Most of the time it's easy too, because guys who complain about shit, what they complain about is generally what they value. So for example, for me, you'll probably see me bitch a lot on Twitter about how like, this isn't the Canada I know kind of stuff. I think I had one how I showed the difference between the Canada Day parade and the gay rights or the gay LGBT parade.
Yeah.
Magnitude of attendance difference. And it just kind of bothered me, like little things. The CN Tower would just show like the rainbow during Canada Day. And I'm like, guys, just one fucking day. And sure enough, that's the stuff I bitch about. So you can already see kind of what I value. And same thing, the guys that bitch about women constantly, yeah, they want a girlfriend. They just don't know how to get one. And so sour grapes is the coping strategy.
I generally bitch about the people being incompetent in corporate, so that makes sense.
But that's what I mean. And I see it from a marketing standpoint. If you can see where the people are complaining, berate them a little bit for it. Because imagine that. Tell a guy who's complaining about something, like it's all your fault and you can fix it and I can help you. It's probably a powerful message.
Man, I look forward to reading your book one time once you're moving past the red pill stuff. How I Made $1 Million Calling People Faggots.
No, still doing the dread one. We're getting through. Oh, speaking of which, the audiobook. I had that sent in on the 28th of October, and they're still trying to do the approvals for it. So by next week, I'm supposed to have an understanding whether it's out or not. I'm kind of thinking you had it right where you just let Jack throw it out on Gumroad. It comes out much quicker.
Well, I don't actually. The whole thing with that is, it was. He asked me if he could do the first one because I had some requests for an audiobook,
Yeah.
but I just don't want to invest that kind of time. And he was like, "Hey, could I do your audiobook?" And I was like, "Yeah, knock yourself out, man." He sent me the files when he read it in. I listened through them. Unfortunately, like Dutch accent for like 8 hours is kind of painful. But anyways, and I was like, "Yeah, that sounds good, man. Just push it out." And he was like, "Yeah, how much do you want me to pay?" And I was like, "No, it's all you, man. You did all the work on it. I just wrote the book, so you just keep whatever you make from it."
Which is nice of you. But he still managed to get out quick because I was talking to him when I was doing mine. I was mentioning all these processes of Q&A and that. And he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, man. I just spoke into
No,
the microphone and put it out. I'm like, oh, well, that's nice.
yeah, we can tell, Jack. We can tell. But the whole thing with it is, for me, it's more like he's actually doing more work to market than I am.
Yeah, which is nice. I guess what's that rule of power? Get other people to do the heavy lifting for you. I can't remember that one. I don't ever use that because most people don't do shit.
Well, my strongest skill in corporate is delegation.
Every Karen
Well,
in HR says that.
well, that's why I said the whole thing I said about owning a company and owning shares in a company instead of running a company.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're CEO, you have to deal with the day to day, you have to deal with meetings, etc., etc. If you own parts of a company, you
Right.
just get part of what they earn, and you have to do minimal work.
Yeah, because all your work would have been either financially, like whatever financially you did on the back end, or you did a bunch of work early on and now it's paying your dividends, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once you get there, you can move on to do other things. So then you get what would we call it? You get scalability.
Which is nice.
Because you can't work two jobs if one of them is CEO.
Tell that to Jack. Isn't the guy, isn't he CEO of Twitter, and doesn't he run some other company too?
Run.
Ah, fair enough.
No, but it's one of those things I noticed because, like, a lot of the guys in corporate and women too now are like the type of, oh yeah, I run marathons, I eat a clean vegan diet, I'm on the boards of 18 charities, I run 4 companies, and I work 80 hours a week in my day job. And it's like, dude, I shared an office with you. You came in at 10, you worked until noon, you were out working, you were working out for 2 hours, you came back in, had 2 meetings, and you were gone again.
Yeah, but that's the like every entrepreneur has to have that story. I built myself up with my own bootstraps and I work 18-hour days and I ate ramen to get this thing going. And you're right. It's all bullshit. It's all kayfabe because everybody wants to believe it's a just world. It's like, oh, okay, so the guy's a corporate magnate. Well, he must have worked like 27 hours a day. That's the only way he can get there. And that makes me feel better about my shitty job because it's an honest 8 hours, but it's not as much as him.
And that's kind of what I love about that whole thing that we're living in kayfabe world,
Mm-hmm.
because no one's being genuine anymore.
Nope. They've ruined beef for me, by the way. I used to love the idea of beef. It was like rappers back in the day. Tupac and Biggie had beef. People got shot. And now when somebody's giving me beef, it's like, is this a marketing ploy or are you actually pissed off? Like, I don't even know.
Well, it's like that whole thing where if someone offends your values, you need to stand up for them and fight. And it's like, if I stood up and fought with every cocksucker who has an issue with my values or something I tweeted on Twitter, I'd have to quit my jobs.
Yeah. I still laugh. Yeah, great example of that too was when I did that She's Not Yours, It's Just Your Turn video. The one where I disagreed with Sean Smith and that Bulldog Mindset, John there. It's one of the guys from John's community came in, time stamped my video like in 30-second increments with rebuttals to each one of it. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. And here's how I know it's like all marketing, not anger. Because I'm like, oh, that's awesome. He time stamped it for me and I pinned his comment to the top. I'm like, oh my God, I've become some of the same problems. Like I see it now. Some drop shipper was, I don't know, shitting on one of my tweets from a while back and I engaged it. And then I looked over and I saw his next response was talking about his thing, and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sakes. All right, enjoy your free fucking clout. Thanks, man. Look forward to seeing you again. I'm like, yeah, I'm just muting him. I don't care anymore. But what's the
Well, I
point?
used to
Nobody
get,
wants to talk. Everybody just wants to be in their own little personal bubble where the earth revolves around them. It's like, I can see why guys are having troubles. They're not even getting conversations with guys trying to help them.
no, it's like they get the two tweet mentions, and then they get hit up with for the selling point.
Yeah.
And the worst part is, I used to have like this algorithm. Like, I do 8 regular tweets or something, and then I do like a couple, one with the books, one with the site.
Right.
I've just stopped plugging anything for the most part, just on the basis that, you know what, I don't even want to be even close to the guys who are like, yeah, plugging shit, plugging shit, plugging shit.
Yeah, I try to my best to stick with the funnels. Like, I still shit on things. Like, I joke around now. The delicious tacos thing where you like show your book in the top 100 and then you see who's before you and after you and make some like shitty comment about them. I never put links in them, but I do like the funnels idea. And it's like, if you guys don't know, a funnel is a marketing idea where you have a top of the funnel, which is just like name recognition, just stuff to get people's eyes on you to know who the hell you are. And then the only thing you should link to on there is middle of the funnel stuff. And that's stuff like, this podcast or my videos or things that are basically free that show you know what you're talking about. And then links to actual products and stuff. So like the book sales will be at the end of the cast here. And that's the idea, is that everybody can opt in as much as they want. So if they just want to see you as a person, they like your humor, they like Carl's jokes, they like Ed's black coffee stuff, just go see him on Twitter and you're done. But if you're like, I kind of like how Carl knows what he's talking about with corporate stuff and with economics, then you watch him on stuff like this. And then if you want to buy his book, it's usually like, there's a link for it in the description now. If you guys have not read Gendernomics 1 or 2, by the way, I strongly suggest, definitely prefer you get the paperback because the cover is just fire, man.
Yeah, the cover is nice on that one. Speaking of if anyone's looking for it, like the Zagazio Sinfandel 2018 version is almost as good as the 2008.
What the hell are we talking about? What is Infidel? Whose?
It's called Zagazio. It sounds Italian. It's a Napa Valley wine.
Oh. I'm like the worst. What do they call them? Sommeliers? What's the wine tasting guru?
Sommelier.
Yeah, sommelier. Because there's so much choice, and I'm the guy, I can tell the difference between a 10 bottle and a 20 bottle, but a $20 bottle and a $100 bottle, I can't. So I literally just like arbitrary rules. For me, it's wherever I am, the local wine, and then if I have to pick a different area, I always go with like not Australian, New Zealand. And I'm like, I got no reason for that, but just because then at least instead of 100 choices of wines, I have like 10 choices, and that's something more manageable. No idea if any of them are any good. For all I know, they're going to be like vinegar taste in wine. I'm like, oh, this is tart.
No, for me, for the most part, I just go with. I have certain preferred countries, but
Right.
if I'm eating food, I'll usually always go with a wine from that country. I have a preference towards German whites. French, obviously sparkling. I'm not a huge on Prosecco or Cava. And then for reds, I would go with Italy probably first. I like French, but there's something with the... I can't remember what it's called, but there's something in that gives me monster headaches in the French ones. But Montrachet is a very good French white. I can recommend that.
Fair enough. I would
It's
just suggest
expensive as fuck.
Ontario locals. And if I'm BC, I'll suggest BC locals. They're award winning. They beat out French. Every wine is always that same grift too. It's like they just won some award that I've never heard of before, and they just beat out the French manufacturers. And I'm like, wow. I wonder how difficult it is to make yourself your own wine tasting award. It's probably pretty easy.
Kind of reminds me of this old wine critic called Robert Parker, I believe it was.
Yeah.
And he said, they always tell me that Parker only likes heavy wines with a lot of oak character. I think that's code for he's American.
I like that one.
That was a side note, though, but Where were we before I got into wine here?
The marketing that you're not actually talking to a person. They're not actually
Oh yeah,
engaging you. They're just using you as a means to an end.
yeah. We all do. To some, everyone does that to some extent, in my opinion. It's just like how much care do you have for your means?
Yeah.
And I always had like this thing: if I'm going to put out the product, or if I'm going to charge people for things, I want them to get their money's worth, and ideally money's worth plus.
Yeah. Oh yeah, same way. And I find that's the easiest ways. That's why I don't mind any of the marketing hullabaloo. So like at the end of the day, as long as you focused on, okay, if somebody gets this, they're not going to regret it. They're going to enjoy it. They'll probably recommend it to somebody. And I'm like, I can live with that. At that point, I got no problem with whatever hustle. But I just find the guys that are the best at the hustle because they neglected the skills of building any value. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sorry, we have Nick August and Chesty going through chat here, and I'm trying to figure out, are they actually talking about the jazz musicians, or are they talking some kind of code that I didn't get to start up here?
Well, at the first, they're talking about the chapters of the new book. It's Dread Without Autism, a primer.
Yeah.
And they've been going through that though. These guys are awesome. By the way, Nick, great example too. If you guys haven't checked out his podcast, he's been like running the startups for God knows like 15, 20 years by now. He has a lot of insight on his if you guys are curious about that world. I do suggest give him a shot. He's woefully underwatched.
Yeah, I've read Punch Riot a couple of times. It's actually a good magazine.
Yeah. I do like it. I can't wait to see it kind of taken off more. Their Patreon one there as well. I guess I shouldn't be. You know what? Screw it. I should be plugging your stuff, not Nick's stuff. Nick, you're on your own. Plug your own shit. I won't ban you though. So that's fill your boots.
Ah, you already put mine in the my links in the description. That's a huge step forward.
Yeah. What I'll do is You know what? Since I'm basically the only channel you're on, I'm just gonna add you to the template. When I add a new video, I used to have like a list, all this kind of information stuff, and everybody's like, you know what? People don't fucking read any of that. Just put the 3 links to the thing you want and add some hashtags. So if people want to search for a topic, they can do it. I'm like, all right.
Yeah, I was
We
kind
did
of
that.
tempted to jump in on Rule Zero today. What were they talking about today? The sad state of masculinity.
Yeah, dude, that one's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I hear Harry Styles wore a dress and the patriarchy wept.
Yeah, there's that one there. Trump's losing the presidency, and so everybody's crying over that one. And Peterson went on a drug overdose, and his daughter's a hoe. All these guys have their heroes, their dad 2.0s, and it turns out, my God, my dad is not a superhero. He's just a guy with normal guy problems. And then they have all these existential crisis dudes coming out, and we're like, hey, I thought that'd be an awesome topic. How all your
All I can
heroes
tell,
aren't as good as you thought they were.
all I can tell you, man, is if Trump losing the election resulted in you crying, you really need 31 seconds of masculinity, man.
All I have to say is if Trump losing the election lost you $100,000, then I'm absolutely happy for you. Keep telling
I
men how
think,
to keep their marriage going strong because I'm pretty sure gambling debts aren't the way to do it.
to be honest, that was like my number one thing for why I wanted. I was hoping Trump would lose, but then I realized the person in question, no fucking way that dude has 100 grand.
Oh, guaranteed. Of course he doesn't have that money. Nobody can ever. You'll never know. I'm sure he'll put up a
Nice clout play
screenshot
though.
of a bank account. But I mean, dude, give me Notepad and like green text, and I'll make everything look like it's a bank account.
Dude, just change the currency display in your bank.
Oh yeah.
We're all billionaires if you start going into rupees or some shit.
What's that letter beforehand? That's the stock I'm buying. Really crazy. Yeah. Trust me. Ah,
But that was also kind of why I got into that with the whole receipt thing a while back.
oh, I remember. Yeah, it took me a
Because
while to get on board with you here.
because if you know that everything online is fairly easy to fake, then you start to see, okay, you know what? You could rent a Lambo, you can rent a hotel room. You, from what I've been told by Rich and Rolo, who have some insight on this, you
Right?
can apparently just walk in and shoot as much as you want in a hotel without even living there.
Oh yeah. I vaguely recall this conversation.
So all of that can be faked. Like I think the only thing that can't be faked is your content.
Pretty much. Especially over
And
time.
Yeah, and how consistent. If you put out like an essay a week, or you put out a video or two every week, or you do a podcast once or twice every week, what you should notice is you should notice change in the person producing it over time. If someone has been static and not changed at all, then it's suspect.
I agree.
But if someone changes drastically, that's also suspect. Unless there's some kind of let's say some dude gets cancer and he changes his entire outlook on life, that's normal.
Yeah. But I think you're referring more to like the Roosh pivot, for example. Did some
Yeah.
mushrooms, his sister died, then all of a sudden he's like talking about the gays or whatever he does.
Well, like I would kind of understood that Rouge pivot if it didn't have so much Jim Jones in it.
There's the question: is it a grift or does he really believe it? I'll still never know. Although I'm pretty sure it's a grift, and he's convinced himself.
No, it's like Chesty here says there are private plane sets now for Instagram photos.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
And the whole thing is like you can't even trust the receipts anymore. So the one thing I think you can trust are field reports. And when you're talking to a guy, you always get that feeling where, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about, or this guy just sounds like he knows what he's talking about. It's like that amazing quote by, can't remember who said it, but it was about John Maynard Keynes, that on some things, he was a consummate expert. On other things, he had read a book jacket some 15 years ago, and it sounded equally authoritative on both topics.
Yeah, that one gets me. That's why I always love that. How do you know that? It's a great question to cut through that BS. But yeah, on this, something else I found, and I'll shit on Riv. You don't mind if I shit on Rivlino on here? I'm sure you don't. He was talking about, like pick up this, do pick up that. He was always the pickup guy, the leaning in. Everybody's like, wow, he sounds very authoritative. But if you talk long enough, if you make enough content, you can't not have a bit of your personality come through. And I remember every now and then you would see him discuss like his 8 girls in 10 years thing, or 10 girls in 8 years. I don't remember. Anyways, or 10 girls. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was essentially like, hey, I'm not actually performing even like an average set of numbers here, or dry spells. But you know what I mean? Like everybody at some point will accidentally let the mask down, and then you can kind of see who the real person is behind the account. There's actually Twitter accounts that have, it's like Brand's breaking character. It's actually a pretty clever account. You'll see where somebody who's had that one note tweet for the longest time eventually starts saying some real shit.
What's that Brand's breaking character?
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. I used to follow it, but I just stopped.
That sounded interesting. I'm going to check that out. It's always good content when we're Googling shit during the podcast.
Damn it. It's not Brand's breaking character, but it's something like that. Oh, gimmick accounts breaking character. That's the one.
I'll see if I can find it.
Yeah, and it's not just a Sphere one, but it's a lot.
Yeah, I found it.
There's Jerry with the $10 and going pure savage at the start. Bill Cosby went through a lot of changes. Actually, you know what? Bill Cosby was remarkably consistent, and I think that.
Yeah, I don't think he made any changes. I think it was. I think the perception, like, for those of you who grew up with Full House, first time you saw Bob Saget doing dirty material.
Oh yeah, it was a mindfuck.
But that was his real material for years. Like he was known for being like the dirtiest fucker in the industry.
Yeah.
It was just low key.
But it's just because everybody knew him from the one place. I think that's the same thing too. Like when you see, I don't know, for example, the somebody who calls himself the president of the Manosphere sounds very authoritative, but then you see people who have met him in real life with like living in his sister's basement, Zelda poster, and you kind of like, oh, it's that K-fob thing just hitting you in the ass right again.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, that's why I love like that wrestling conversation we had with Chesty is almost 2 years ago now. And the funniest thing the funniest thing about that is how on point it was, and we had no idea how fucking on point we were actually being in that conversation. It's insane.
Yeah, that one was 4 hours a day drinking. I know I left it sloshed. I'm surprised we actually got through it and were able to still string a sentence together.
Yeah, that was I've had a couple of those, but the worst part about it is that when we do these podcasts, and I'm going to fluff you and Chesty and a couple of the other guys a bit here,
Yes.
is that there are two types of podcasts I end up doing. There are the podcasts where you're kind of on point and you have a topic and it's something you want to go through and you're constantly parsing, like, how does this reflect on the topic?
Yeah.
And then you have the podcast that where you're just having a conversation with one or more dudes.
Yeah.
And you just see where you're going. And it's very easy if you're drinking to get day drunk on those podcasts where it's just like having a conversation with a couple of buddies. Because you're at some point you forget that you're on mic and you're just sitting there talking.
And I like it too, because I mean, at the very least, you guys are understanding who we actually are as people, how we think about things. You see us on a various group of topics. We admit when we don't know things. When we do know things, we're fairly confident about it. But it's like there's no character to break.
Hell, I posted my shutdown rate on Tinder for everyone to see in a fucking spreadsheet on my site.
Yeah. And I like it because nobody does stolen valor with like a supply tech. They always have to be a special forces guy. And it's like the best way to tell if somebody is being honest is, are their brags like is it not brag worthy, the kind of stuff they brag about? And that's why I like it. You have to hear a brand and you'll listen to it for a long time and eventually they'll start bringing up some real shit and then you'll realize the ones that brag the most tend to say the most messed up stuff when they're not bragging, as opposed to guys like, for example, you don't really brag about what you do, but when you let it slip that you had something screw up, it's still a display of higher value, to use pickup terms. Like for your examples, how many times do you get shot down on a spreadsheet? But that shows, oh, okay, Carl did do 300 approaches, even though he got shot down on 150 of them. But even in there, you learn more about it, and you don't actually see like the shot to your ego. I think that's the key difference.
I think I could probably do a book entitled Times Carl Fucked Up. We need like 2 or 3 volumes. Because I just think it's like the whole reason why I find that whole 22-year-old with 6 figures in a Lambo so funny is that if that's real, that's probably someone who started with a head start. It's like Richard Branson's old comment. You know how you become a multi-millionaire in airlines?
I'll be a billionaire and buy an airline.
Yeah, exactly. So either they started off really well or it's an act. And most of the time when I realize the biggest sign for me that something is an act is when I ask myself, okay, if I was in that person's position, would I be shilling shit on Twitter?
So I don't like going that one because for some guys it's a passion thing. Maybe their industry dried up. I can always see reasons for it. Plus, now that I'm seeing how much some of these guys make, I can almost see it. Like John was talking in their private thing earlier, but
oh yeah, I saw that one.
But here's my thought on it. Tate, great example. Like whatever, Tate, good guy. Don't like the brand. That's whatever. He was talking with Rich about cars on one of their podcasts. I don't remember how long ago, and he had brought up for like his Lambo, he would buy them at police auctions that they confiscated from drug dealers and shit like that. So you're getting them for like 10 cents on the dollar. So does like Tate owns a Lambo, but does he really? Like he officially owns the Lambo, but when you think of a Lamborghini, you think of somebody who's got $250,000 to throw out on a car. Meanwhile, he's getting it for like, 100,000 because they confiscated it from some drug dealer.
I want to do a story now on a one man's way comment.
I like that one. I was in MARSOC with the Marines. Real special forces never brag. They actually do the opposite and play it down. Yeah, that's the same reason they tell you, like, don't wear your uniform to and from work. Don't want to draw attention to yourself. Because that's the problem. If you screw up as Carl, you're just Carl, that asshole. But if Carl's in a uniform and screws up, now the military's an asshole. And probably the best lesson you can learn about not ending up like fucked over like those the Halifax 5 they called them, the guys who were like celebrating Canada Day with our old British ensign, which good for them. I don't know why they went to war with like Chief Grizzly Mom or whatever the hell they called her. But like the best way to stay out of trouble in the military is just whatever you do, don't end up on the news.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I want to get at that because at one point in my life, I shared an apartment with a dude,
Yeah.
and he was working like a menial job, but he seemed to have quite a bit of cash.
Right.
So I kind of fell into being his drinking buddy, despite the fact that I was 17 at the time. But he was the guy who would always buy beer and shit.
Nice. Good man.
And after we'd been drinking one night, I kind of because he had like this weird ass fucking scar on his face.
Right.
And I've been curious, like, how do you get a scar that looks like a perfect, like, right angle fucking triangle on your face? So
What do you
we
say?
kind of got it. So we got into drinking one night, and I kind of asked him, like, dude, what the fuck happened to your face? And he was like, oh yeah, that was back when I was in Lebanon with special forces, and some guy pistol whipped me with a Tokarev.
Just throw that one out casually. Oh.
And like I had no idea that this guy had even been in the military. It was fucking hilarious.
That's awesome. Dude, I love stuff like that. It's like a mystery to unbox. I could see why girls find it attractive. Because for you, just nothing makes sense, but he seems like a really cool guy. He has a confidence that, the manager at Best Buy just wouldn't have. Love that stuff.
And, that's a whole thing. Like people who like the most braggy people are the people who have the least bit to brag about.
Yep.
In my experience.
We have to. Ooh, here's some science to prove you right. I found this out. You know how dogs like to mark by pissing on shit? It turns out small dogs lift their leg higher than big dogs. And that's the perfect analogy to this. And it makes sense because I watched my dog, and he's like with his hips, he does like a full on double bicep spread with him to get the highest angle possible when he's diddling on somebody's fucking house. It makes me laugh.
To look taller, I guess.
Yeah, that's just it. So any dog coming over to see his territory thinks it's a bigger dog. And I think that's exactly what's going on here.
Kind of funny.
Guys are pissing above their leg level. I gotta come up with something catchy for that for Twitter. I'll
No, the thing is, the same thing I had with that was one of the funnier things because someone actually called me out when I posted those Tinder stats.
Yeah.
And I was like, and I just told him, like, dude, if I was trying to brag here, why would I have given myself like a 17.5% strikeout rate?
Well, that's the thing. Yeah, guys will give themselves something stupid like 50%. And that's always how you find out. Like, it only works on guys who don't know any better. Like the 6-figure side hustle thing, that only works on guys who don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. Because, for example, Chesty makes money. So if you start talking to Chesty, or like you said it actually, where it was the guy's like, I consult $10,000 a month or $1 million a year, or something like that. And you broke down the hours, you're like, this makes no fucking sense at all. But that's the thing, it's also hard, because if a guy doesn't know to even think that way, he doesn't know if it's bullshit or not.
Well, it's the same thing. If you ask a guy who doesn't lift, like, how much do you bench? It's always like 220 or something.
Yeah. 220 or 1,000 pounds. I'm in the 1,000-pound club. I got a 1,000-pound bench.
Like, if you ask like a fat chick, like if you do something and she's like, I'm actually in very good shape. I can run a mile in a minute. And it's like, okay, 1 minute mile. So I didn't see you in the Olympics there, girly.
Olympics. I didn't see you in a car.
No, but that's why, like with Chesty too, you actually know that he is what he says he is, because when you actually talk money with him, he knows what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah. But I can imagine, though, it must be hard. And this is, I think, where the issue is with a lot of guys, and this is going to tie into the Rule Zero topic. They don't know where to start. They didn't have guys telling them. Dad was kicked out of the house. All their teachers were chicks. All the college professors are soy. And so they have never seen a guy who knows what he's doing talk about him knowing what he does. And so when they see some dude bragging about his Lamborghini and his penis size and his 6'7" height, they don't know any fucking better.
Well, to do the example you had earlier, let's say Tate is buying his Lambos at 10 cents on the dollar at the police auction.
Yeah, and don't go to him with like he said it's actually 70. I don't care. You
No,
got the
I'm
point.
not doing that. I'm doing
I'm
this to be
talking
an
to the audience because
example.
there's one
I'm
guy
not.
in there who's going to
Yeah.
start some fucking beef or nothing.
Like, I'm not looking for beef. I'm just saying, let's say you're buying a Lambo at 10% at 10% of its actual value.
Yeah,
You already own a Lambo. If you take a picture of yourself and post it with the Lambo, everyone's going to assume you pay the market price for it.
right.
Because people, same thing if you post a picture of yourself with some chick, they're going to assume kissing you. They're going to assume that, you picked her up. They're not going to assume she's a hooker.
Yeah, or an actress or your sister you hired for the afternoon. Hypothetically speaking, I hope. I'm just
Okay,
going by
that
the Pornhub
hypothetical I
stats.
didn't quite follow, but okay, fair enough. You can tell me after we go off.
No, there's no story behind that one. I was just thinking of Sterling when he talked about how he's working for porn companies, and the bigger they get, uh, the more they mitigate risk. So he's
Yeah.
like, at one point during this porn, I had to be like the stepson sleeping with mom, and he goes, they said you have to at least 3 times when she calls you son, you have to say stepson. I just started laughing. I don't know. Just imagine your porn dialogue being dictated by the legal team. So I was just
Yeah,
laughing.
but like, to bring it back though to the slog, it's just that everyone is selling the illusion that the slog is easy. You can just kind of power through it, and you can. But at some point, you need those bright spots in the slog, or you need an overarching plan with it.
Yeah.
Like, I had a plan when I started working those annoying ass fucking jobs, when I was burning myself out doing startups. The idea was, okay, to get enough experience under my belt that I could leverage that upwards.
Right.
Because the good thing about startups, and especially very small, limited fund startups, is that if you're good with something, you're a lawyer, let's say you have a business degree, you have an IT degree, you can go in and become their guy on that topic. That means if you're that guy in like a 4-man company, you can go back afterwards and tell future employees, yeah, well, I did all the stuff a CFO normally does for this company.
Yeah.
Here are the records of it. It's
See,
like
now
one
that
guy.
guy's smart because there's always that idiot who has like CFO as a business card because he's running a 2-person company too, and he just wants to flex with it. Two different approaches.
My personal way to get hired was a guy I know who worked at a stock brokerage.
Right.
He just walked he was pissed off as his current employer. So he just printed out how much he'd been catching in bonuses. And he walked over to the shop next door. He just put it on the director's desk. He's like, I made these motherfuckers 300 millions over the past 2 years, and here are the papers to prove it.
Hey, you know what? He cut right to the chase. Right to the chase. Did it work?
Yeah, it worked brilliantly. But what you have to keep in mind with it is just about gathering that experience. And early in your career, that's fine to do. If you're switching careers, it's fine to do. It's basically getting haste because you're paying dues.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a plan with it. If you start off working, the help desk at the IT department at some company right out of college or right out of getting some kind of trade school diploma in IT,
Right.
that's fine, but have a plan with it, because you don't want to be in the help desk for 40 years, because those guys are like the women who've been in HR for 40 years.
Yeah. I do agree some versatility or agility too, because sometimes, like I said, talk to me 5 years ago. I would like, are you going to leave the military? Oh, I guess 10 now. Like, I would have never thought I'd leave the military. And then, 5 years out into there, I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. I'm going to go do corporate. And then tell me 2 years later, yeah, you're going to write a book and talk about masculinity and shit online. I'll be like, fuck off. Like, there's always a plan, but then as soon as like something ends up changing, you got to be able to walk over to somebody's desk with your, here's that 300 million I made, hire me. Like that pivot.
Well, like, the only reason why I'm sitting here talking to you like this right now was, how annoyed I was at my old job. And after, working my ass off there for a number of years, I was like, okay, I need a month off because I'm exhausted.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And then I just demographicked up a city and I went there. And I was just going to go there and chill and do some game and so on. So I ended up doing that 30 days worth of just hardcore Tindering.
Right.
And I actually like the city enough that when I was on my like second, third week there, I started looking, okay, what are the employment opportunities here? And I found some, and I just specialized about 10, 15 CVs, sent them out. And I didn't think anything more of it. Went back to work, and then suddenly I had to do like 10 interviews. And I did the interviews, got 4 offers, and I just went with one of them. So I wasn't going to move. It was just like when the opportunity arose, I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I'd rather do this shit.
Yeah, and you had the flexibility that, like, I'm sure you had a plan with the old company, but now you're like, okay, plans changed, so your plan changed. Maybe there's still the same ultimate goal at the end of the tunnel, but your pathway changes, and there's a flexibility there. A lot of guys are so hooked on their current track that they aren't able to have that flexibility, which is crazy because I'd say it's a better skill to have than being able to maximize your one track, being flexible enough to change your track if you need.
Yeah, but if you go back in the day, you had like the giants of strategy. So you had like Michael Porter is the big one of the analytic approach to business strategy.
Okay.
And that was well accepted within corporate for years and years. And Porter still has good tools, but in a rapidly changing market, having a 5-year strategic plan doesn't work. If it's very rigid, you need a lot of those things to be flexible because, let's say your plan is, we're going to cut down on the diesel or the fuel usage of our cars to have them become more environmental. And suddenly Elon Musk shows up with a fucking Tesla and has reworked how fucking batteries work. If you're 2 years into your 5-year plan, at that point you need to change because if you lose those 3 years going on your old track, you're not going to be able to catch up anymore.
Right. But then you have to have the foresight to see those 3 years versus the 2 years you already spent. A lot of people, I'd argue most guys can't. Or at least they don't want to. Well, it's cost sunk fallacy. Same thing in the marriage. The guy's like, I put in 15 years with this wife. Meanwhile, she's horrible. There's a bunch of other girls that want to sleep with the guy. He's successful finally, but he's like, no, I want to make this work because I invested this. But, the equivalent of the girl fucking the pool boy and being, gaining a bunch of weight or all those little situations are the equivalent of the Tesla coming in with a new battery. It's like, yeah, dude, you got to adapt to the times and stop thinking of what you've already invested and think about, like, what is it? Economics is like decisions, make decisions on the margins. I don't know if that's fully applicable here, but that's how I think of it.
Well, it's the same thing, basically. But what you have to be able to see then is, okay, the one track where we're cutting down on the fuel use is a good track to keep continuing on. But we also have to introduce a new track here and split resources in order to follow the electric plus the hybrid, for instance. So you just have to.
But do you want to do that though? Like if Tesla's going full steam ahead with batteries at 100% of their resources, unless you are grossly larger than them. If you just kind of 50-50 on both sides, isn't that basically making yourself
suboptimal? I didn't say 50-50. You could do 70-30. You could do 60-40. You can balance those things out. It's just a matter of you have to have your strategies be adaptable enough. But then you had this Canadian fucker from McGill called Henry Mintzberg.
Yeah.
Who came up with this idea called emergence strategy. And I do like the idea. But I think it's too easy to come back and say, yeah, this was completely strategic choice. Because his argument was the corporate strategy arises from the interactions the business has with its environment. And to some extent, I agree with that. But I think you need to have your, let's say, flexible long-term strategy. Right. And then you have to be willing to adapt that based on environmental feedback. It's the same thing I've said with pickup. Like, you can create your pickup persona and you kind of visualize that because I think that's a good, useful thing. Like, if you look at sexually successful you, how does he stand? How does he walk? What is he wearing? What does he look like? What does he say? How does he look while saying it? But then you have to kind of bridge the gap between that guy and sexually unsuccessful you. And you're never going to be like that full image, but it's about getting on the way there. And on that way, you have to be flexible because it might reveal strengths or weaknesses in you that you didn't know were there. Like, for instance, if you're very good at storytelling is amazing for pickup.
Yeah, huge.
But if you're not good with storytelling, you have to replace that with something else.
Looks money game.
It's kind of hard when you get back into it, but that is kind of like my approach to just be flexible when new information arises. It's like another amazing quote. So, well, excuse me, sir. When the facts change, I changed my mind. What do you do?
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of question people who bang on about one thing for 10 years. It's like either they found like the answer that no one else has found 10 years ago, or they just found something to hang their hat on and they've just banged on about that for 10 more years.
I think it's mostly the second one because I see it. Like, there's all these. I'm sure you guys have all seen the different, like, how to market yourself on X platform guides on Gumroad that are out there. We kind of poke fun at them, but a lot of them suggest that. Like, I remember it was actually a course I bought. It was like a $50 one way back when I first started. The guy's like, for your Twitter account, pick 3 things, and those are the only 3 topics you talk about. Stay in your lane. For him, it was um, military, drop shipping, and something else. And he goes, yeah, anything you want to say, drive it to that. Anybody who's talking about any topic, drive it to that. And I was realizing a lot of what you were saying really bothers you about people, like the buy Bitcoin people in that, is that they're literally just following what the consultants told them to do. Whatever happens, it has to be these 3 topics, or I shouldn't talk at all. And then you're kind of missing an opportunity. Like, everybody is a brand right now, and almost being an anti-brand would probably be a better thing. Like, genuinely engage your audience as a human being, human to human. And I think that's more important than, oh, that was an off-topic post. Carl doesn't normally talk about this.
Yeah, well, I think that like I wrote a whole post in rhyme because I was bored.
Yeah, but that's just it. And it sends a strong signal. Like, say what you will about Carl, the book, the brand, the Twitter account, talking here, whatever. The one thing I can say 100% is that you're not pandering to anybody. And for guys who get pandered to day in and day out, I can see it being ultimately refreshing. That Carl's the kind of guy that if I say something stupid, he's going to go tell me to fuck myself. And I've done the same thing. But I enjoy that. That's like, it lets you know you're talking. It's like real human interaction. And I think, I don't know, as guys get more atomized, I think we're getting less and less examples of that. So people are becoming more and more detached from what it's like to be a human being. Kind of worries me.
Well, I think that's kind of the the funny thing about social media, because the whole reason why people started marketing on social media in the first place was because it wasn't perceived by the audience as a brand.
Yeah.
But now everyone has become very apparently a brand on social media. Rishi, you can find my books on Amazon, Gendernomics and Gendernomics Building Value.
Links are in the description.
Yeah, but now everyone is so transparently a brand that social media is losing that authenticity. Because the reason why people responded higher to social media advertising was because it felt more authentic.
Yeah, it sounded like a buddy recommending something to you, so you had more authority in your mind than, company X saying buy company X product.
Yeah, but now when I see like the guy running company X recommending products by company X, then it, like, I'd say actually one of the marketers I like the most on my Twitter feed is Slog is his name. He sells olive oil.
Oh, the olive oil guy. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a mix of, he's got some humor in it. He has information about olive oil. He shows off food he does with the olive oil. And he's actually showing, okay, I just finished working the olive grove. Now I'm going to go in, I'm going to have this meal. And it's like, and I think that's a kind of, because he's telling a story with it. And he's also being entertaining while he's doing it.
Yeah.
It's like the US has the NSA, and like in Serbia, we have the Babushka network.
I take it babushkas are the old ladies with the scarves over their heads.
Yeah, exactly.
Careful, she'll hit you with her purse.
No, I just think that's a good one. But the one I thought was funnier about the when you realize you're running into a brand was early on when I was working on my site.
Mm-hmm.
I asked a well-known guy who's known for doing sites, like, should I pay extra to have like one of those unique WordPress templates? It's like, yeah, those are worth it. It really sets you apart. And I go onto WordPress and I'm going to buy one. And WordPress literally said, buying a premium template really sets you apart.
Word for word. Orange Man bad. Workplace template sets you apart.
I just thought that was funny.
I thought it was very funny.
The thing is, like, I like being able to talk to the guy behind the brand, because I actually, that's why I like, like Black Rifle Coffee.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they are a brand, but you can tell who the guys are because they're so tongue in cheek with their whole branding.
Yeah, an
And I think
engagement
that's
thing.
part of it. And I think if you're going to do one of those small niche brands, your competitive advantage is being personable and being likable and being you.
Yeah. And if you're not likable, well, fucking learn. Learn to tell a joke and laugh at the end of it. Don't say something autistic.
Yeah, and learn to be honest. Like one of the brand things is like this works for everything, and but if the brand was like, okay, yeah, if you're doing this, maybe we're not right for you.
It's almost a good thing too, and that's the problem. That's why people pander, because they think everybody is a potential client, and I'm like,
Yeah, like
not
if you're
everybody who sees you is going to want your book. And if anything, you acting the way that your book reads is going to give people a better indication if they're going to enjoy it or not. It's like, do you don't want a fickle person's money because they're just going to bitch about your shit day in and day out. It's a waste of
yeah, it
time.
kind of reminds me of this one of amazing Anthony Bourdain scenes where it was like a chef who was like when the customers ordered their steak well done. And he just tells the server, "No, I don't cook meat well done in my restaurant. Tell the customer to get the fuck out of here."
I like that. I really like that. But you know what I mean? Like, how awesome is that? If anything, that's like high status type stuff too. Like Louis Vuitton does the same thing. Like, did you know at the end of the year, once they finish like the 2020 model of Louis Vuitton purposes, they don't like give them off to an outlet to sell them at a discount. They burn whatever didn't sell that year.
Yeah, it's maintaining brand value.
Yeah, maintaining the value by being, in that case, by like the scarcities. Like, no, you're gonna buy this. It's like the Lambo issue. There's not going to be a government auction to buy a Louis Vuitton purse. If you're buying it, you know the lady got her husband or sugar daddy to pay full price.
It kind of reminds me of Marco Pierre White is another chef that a great one
Oh,
because he was running kind of a high end restaurant, and a customer came in and he really wanted French fries.
okay.
So Marco went in his kitchen. He used a lot of time to painstakingly cut these to exact size, blanching them, double frying them, served them with truffle salt and everything, and went out and delivered them to the customer's table and charged him $150 for it.
Ugh. I guess he's got his standard.
Well, I think that's the other way of like those are two different approaches. One is okay, the customer wants this thing that we do serve, but he wants me to trash the fucking meats. And the other one is okay, the customer wants something that's off menu, but I don't mind making like, lowbrow food if the guy pays me enough.
Weimer Please did the same thing when he said he was going to do consulting for the Sphere, but he wanted 10,000 an hour because he's like, that's the point where it's worth it for me. I should have used his rates. I got retired by now.
Yeah, but I do think that's a certain point to it, though. That's kind of like why the reason I never got into consulting here is it's too much like the day job. But like if I wanted more people to disregard my advice and do whatever the fuck they want, then I'd just bill more hours at the day job.
Yeah. Oh, it pays better, and they generally are nicer about it because everybody doesn't want to start a conflict at work.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
And like I said, it's nice, but it gets old quickly because everybody asks the exact same questions, gets the exact same advice, and you find you're just repeating yourself, and then you very quickly get to that point where you realize you're just phoning it in, and you're like, nah, it's not. And I was never comfortable with that idea. Like, first off, it's not scalable, and secondly, if I'm just going through the motions, like, is it really valuable for the guy? Is it really valuable for me, or is it just making it bad on everybody? So that's why I was like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna do it.
Well, speaking of conflicts at work, I once called a supplier into a meeting at the corporate lawyer's office, and I titled the meeting the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Okay. Oh, dude, I just noticed Rolo's in the chat. What's going on, RT? Look at you up already. I guess snowmobiling season starting early this year. Or I guess
yeah.
global warming. I'm like here in like mid-November. Hey, is it going to snow soon? I remember that.
Yeah,
Dude.
Rolo's been prepping his snowmobile for like 4 months now. Him and
Yeah,
Colt are getting each other worked up over snowmobiling pictures.
that's all right. I just can't wait to hear Rolo catching his snowmobile on fire again this year. It burned down. I had to slog back. There's the hustle. Use the hood of my old sled as a toboggan and slide home off the hill. Adam, you got a point here too. Here's the thing. I'm gonna use you as an example, Adam. It's not you per se, but like this kind of stuff. The only thing between me and a six-figure salary is the country. So my question is then, why haven't you moved? And I notice a lot of guys do this, where there's always like one thing stands in the way. I don't know if it's you, but you're a perfect example for this. So take it for what it's worth. You know what I mean,
Well,
Carl? I
the
could have
only
had
thing
50
that's
pickups, but I live in a bad town, or there's always one thing in the way that's very easily solvable. Oh.
yeah, sorry, I was trying to see who Rolo's talking to here.
I think in general with like Adam and the plumber and that. Yeah,
Yeah.
phoning in to make
No,
sure
like,
1
but
million a
it's
year,
like
aren't you a genius? I'd
it,
agree you are.
well, the thing is, like, if you're at that point, it's like the only thing between me and a six-figure salary is the country. Well, then you kind of have to ask yourself the question: what's the disposable income left over in your current country versus the new country? Because if you, let's say, you get an entry-level job at some kind of Silicon Valley firm,
Right.
and you have to move there from some backwater, then you may find that 5 figures in a backwater is better than low 6 figures in Silicon Valley. Like, don't get caught up by the numbers being thrown out. Like, I don't even see why people keep throwing out 6 figures. There's a huge gap between 100 grand a year and 900 grand a year.
And 100 grand a year in New York versus 100 grand a year in Tennessee.
Yeah, well, to be honest though, like even yeah, I wouldn't want to live in Tennessee, man.
Well,
Fuck that.
that's the other choices. But this is like that was the exact choice I had for the military. Everybody's like, "No, stick around, man. You're 12 years in. Another 8 years, you get your pension, and then you get your full pension." I literally just did the math. Like, how much does the pension pay out over years? How much more would I have to require private sector to make it worth my while? And it turns out, for those last 8 years, as long as I was earning 20 grand more than I was in the military, it worked out being better for me just to leave. And so I left. And then, sure enough, right out the gate, 20 grand more. And then 30. And then I'm like, oh, okay. So, like, it wasn't even close. But I didn't know that. I had to run through the numbers and it had to make sense. And then had to have some experience until I realized that the salary hustlers were just hustling me to get that pension and stay in for another 8 years.
Yeah, well, that was the same kind of thing I had going here because, like, I don't like negotiating.
Really?
So what I do is I go into a company and I tell them what salary I want, and I go with the company that offers me that or higher.
Is that your like that is that actually the salary you want, or is it 10% more or 10% less? Like,
That's the exact off number you need to. If you offer me exactly that number, I'll take the job.
so if you, that's it. No fandangling. It's just that.
Yeah, it's that number. Either you offer it or you don't. If you don't offer it, then fuck you.
Fair enough.
And then, of course, there is some aspect, of you have to look into like bonuses and so on because taking this job has a slightly lower base salary than the other offers,
Right?
but the bonus of it kind of makes up for it.
Oh, did I lose track
No,
of you with this one? Because Rollo's actually got a good point. If that logic, if Tony Robbins or MGTOW dictionary figures how to make out 10 million a year, they're legit entrepreneur geniuses. I mean, you're not wrong if they do, sure. But that's the thing. It's like for them, but do I want that from me? I think that's the issue too. It's like I'm not referring to this stuff as how you must work to make money or how you must work to be an entrepreneur or do this. Because I'm like you said yourself, 100 grand goes a lot farther in Tennessee, but I'm not going to move to fucking Tennessee.
no.
10 million a year is entrepreneur genius, or you hit on the right niche at the right place, right time. But
No, but I think my logic on this is just on the basis that you can make 100 million without being a legit genius. You can be completely retarded and make 100 million. We have plenty of examples of
true.
that. But you have to respect that either way. If you we're able to hit on that cultural zeitgeist and leverage that to your maximum benefit, there is some degree of thought behind it.
Right.
Like I can't say you did that and you're also retarded.
Fair enough. Although I guess we should wrap this up. Rolo's starting up. It's on your channel today, isn't it, Rolo? Rule Zero. It's about half an hour, and I haven't had breakfast yet, and it's almost noon here.
Oh, slack.
Damn, it's too bad. I almost want to continue this one up next week or later on.
Yeah, well,
sometime.
I'll drop in on Rolo if he'll have me on his channel this time.
Oh yeah, I think so. Anyways, yeah, guys, check that one out. You guys see this one? Don't forget, Carl's books are in the thing too. We finally started adding him to the description. Kind of freaked me out when one of you guys didn't know he's like authored 2 books already, so I figured we got to correct that one. Half an hour, Rolo's channel, and it's Drew was Twitter banned. Ooh, we'll talk